Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstead, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstead, here with Mr. Keith Myers. Keith, it's a beer review or beer sipping or beer sampling show mixed with a question and answer show, and we kind of combine that all, and we see how much fun we can have in a little afternoon recording session. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I've been looking forward to this show for a long time because it's nice to, we come to these shows mostly unprepared other than that we've collected a selection of brews, and then we just kind of see what happens. And they're a lot of fun to record. So, I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions from our listeners, and we've got a few questions that we've put together for ourselves, and I have no idea what you're going to ask. Likewise for you. We did come ready, though, with a selection of beer. I've got two beers that I've brought to the table that I'm going to drink during the show. But I'm going to let you kind of introduce the segment since you're the beer aficionado, and you know a little bit more about it than I do, although I do enjoy drinking one now and again, especially today, Keith. I kid you not. It's 113 degrees outside.
God, it is brutal down there. That would be that was one of the big reasons why I left, because I could not handle the heat in the summer. It was just way too bad. So anyways, but going into this, I have 5 beers here. I am not going to drink them all because I am not that kind of a individual. But what I'm going to do is I've got these 5. They're all different styles. Well, no, I got 2 of the same style. But they're all pretty different beers, and I figured I'm going to let you pick which one that I drink while we're having doing the show, and I'm going to review it as we go.
Nice.
For the fun of it. So so here we've got some options here. So I tried to go really disparate here. So I've got Joe IPA from 10 Barrel Brewing. That's always a good one. I've got a couple from Pelican Brewing, which is out on the ocean. We've got Raspberried at Sea and a Tsunami Stout, which is an export stout, which is different than different kinds. There are lots of different stouts, but it's a drier version. I've got a Lava Rock Porter from Dick's Brewing in Centralia, Washington. And then the other one, which is a standby for me, it is the Obsidian Stout from Deschutes. It's more of a sweet stout. It's not like a milk stout, but it's definitely not as dry as an export stout. So those are
nice.
my five here.
Wow.
And why don't you pick one for me to drink?
Well, I'm doing a couple ambers. So I've got a Oak Creek Brewing Amber Ale, and the Oak Creek Brewery is in Sedona. So I'm staying local in this show today for me. And so I'm going to do an amber, and my other one is the Barrio Rojo Scottish style amber ale out of Tucson. It's a little heavier than the Oak Creek, and I think I'll probably try to grant you the same favor and kind of go a little lighter to begin with, and then end up with something a little bit more balanced and more flavorful, and a little heavier for you at the end. So you need to help me a little bit with that, because that would be, to me, would either be the raspberry or the IPA to start, and maybe end up with one of the stouts or porters. Is that how you would normally want to do that, Keith?
That would work. Normally I would do it in reverse, just because the hops are so strong in the IPA that I would do that afterward because
Right.
otherwise it takes a few drinks before you get rid of
Well, do
that
you want to
flavor out
do
of
the
your mouth.
two?
But
Do you want to do the two stouts and compare the two,
no, you
or would
said
you
you wanted me
want
to do
something a little
what
bit different?
you said you wanted me to do either the raspberry or the IPA. So take your pick. Which one?
Okay, let's do the raspberry.
Okay.
Just
So this
because
is
I'm very curious myself, because I normally, so the only raspberry that I'm familiar with is the one over, oh my gosh, I just lost it in my brain. McMinimum's does
yeah.
a raspberry and usually mix that with the stout, right? And you get like the Rubinator. Is that correct?
Something like that because they also have Ruby, which is there. I don't know. I don't. They make a bunch of different stuff, and I tend to go for smaller breweries when I can.
Yeah, right.
But
Gotcha.
I've had a few of them, but not often enough to know like all of their offerings.
Right. So that would be the only berry flavor beer that I think I've had intentionally in all my years. And so I'm very curious as to see what this one's about. And then for the second one, would you prefer the porter or the stout?
It's up to you. I told you you're picking, not me.
How about the Tsunami Stout? Because I've never heard of it. I've had the Deschutes Stout before, I believe.
Okay.
Or at
So
least I've had a Deschutes Stout.
So it works out then that I'm drinking both from the same brewery, Pelican Brewing, which is on the Oregon coast. They have 3 breweries: Cannon Beach, Tillamook, and Pacific City.
Nice.
Pacific City is the original, the home one. I've been to all 3 of them. They're awesome. One of my favorite breweries, which is why I have these here. So you're saying you've only had one berry beer. I've only had one fruit beer that I thought hasn't been absolutely undrinkably bad. And that was a raspberry hef from North Jetty Brewing, which is also out on the coast, but on the Washington coast.
And you decided to get this one because you thought you'd give it a second shot?
No, I've never tried this one before. And I got this one because it's Pelican, and I've never had a bad beer from Pelican. And I've tried different styles, the ones that I don't normally like from Pelican, and I've liked them.
Nice. I do too, actually. But it's been a couple years since I've had one.
It's the same for me with Freem from Hood River. There are styles of beer that I don't typically like, but when I try them from there, I'm like, okay, I could get behind this. But when I try it from anywhere else, I'm just like, yeah, no, this isn't my thing. And so those 2 breweries for me are kind of like, I've yet to have one that's bad. So that was the attempt with this. So it's an ale with raspberries, raspberried at sea, 6% alcohol by volume, only 25 IBUs. Let's see. Oh, wow, that's almost like drinking a seltzer. And it's really light.
So does it have a lot of carbonation?
Not really. It's just really light. It goes right on past the tongue, and the flavor is there. It's but it's almost crisp, which is not something you'd think of for a beer that's 6%.
Now that's kind of why I chose mine as the opening one, the Oak Creek Brewery from Sedona, the Amber Ale. It's a 5.0 alcohol for me, but it's a lighter kind of a caramely malt and kind of a refreshing finish a little bit, and the taste is sweet and slightly citrusy, and not a lot of hoppiness to it. But it's a good beer to drink when it's warm outside.
Yeah, so this one you don't taste a lot of the malt. It's clearly made with a lot of the pale malt, which is the bulk of any brew, whether it's a stout or a pale or whatever, because it's the one that gives you all the enzymes that turn starches into sugar so you can ferment it. But this is clearly made with a lot of that and very little else, as far as like it's just really kind of flat in flavor. It's one note as far as the malt goes. Very little hops. Very little hops. I don't know, like it's there's not enough for me to even give you an idea of what the hop variety might be, because it's very little. There's just a little bit of bittering there that comes in at the end. Um, the raspberry is also pretty mild. Like it's not too profound. It doesn't like get in there and mask the beer. But it's the whole thing is super light and crisp. And like I said, my first drink, it tasted more like a seltzer, like a White Claw, like a raspberry White Claw than a beer. And then the second drink, and I'm like, no, now I'm starting to pick up the hops at the end, and I'm getting a little more
Right.
of that, the floral nature of hops, and overall, for especially for a fruit beer, I'd say it's pretty good.
Ladies and gentlemen, all pro beer taster, Keith Myers.
No.
So, hey, observation. We're
Okay.
not talking about your beer. Like, we've done 3 of these shows, Keith, or 3 or 4 of them, and you've always brought your own beer to the show. And what's happening?
What's happening is COVID-19. My system is out of CO2, so I can't pour beer from it. And I can't get it because the place where I get my CO2 locally has not been open. If I had a business, they would deliver to the business so that way they don't have to open their doors for people coming in. But I don't. So I'm not a brewery.
Is there
I'm
any
just
way
a
that
home
you could
brewer.
run that through a veterinary clinic? I'm asking for a friend.
No, I don't think that would work. I'm not
All
sure
right.
why a veterinary clinic would ever need CO like restaurant grade CO2. So,
That's funny. All right, so here's the deal. So we're gonna keep sipping on these beers, and we're gonna do some questions and just kind of go back and forth throughout. So hopefully everyone will stick with us and just kind of have fun, and we're gonna loosen the tie a little bit and just kind of relax and just have a good show. So we'll get back to the beers, but let's take a couple of listener questions right off the top. I had one from Bruce Coots at Bruce Coots says, "Do you think the defense will improve this year with the upgrade at corner? And could Ryan Kerrigan be a possible trade target for the Seahawks to upgrade their pass rush?" And then he said, "Love the show." Love that comment. Love the show. I'll go first. So I'll take the first part and maybe, or the second part, whatever. The addition of like Quentin Dunbar and the full season of Diggs and the second season of Amati and Marquise Blair and Trey Flowers in the third corner role improves everything, but you've got the loss of the stud in Clowney, right? But you've got better overall depth in Green and Collier and Mayoa and Irvin and now Taylor and Alton Robinson. And then you've got Jordan Brooks at linebacker. I think the defense is better overall. So that's my first part of the question. And as far as Kerrigan or the trade compensation or whatever it is, I don't think so. And here's why. Kerrigan's, a former first round draft pick. He's got one more year on his contract. He had kind of a down year in 2019, turns 32 in August, has an $11.5 million cap hit on his remaining 1 year contract. Now, he does have zero dead money. Like the Redskins have zero dead money if they cut him. And they could cut him and save $11.5 million on their cap, which is a better possibility than the Seahawks trading for him for that big, huge number. And so, and he's a 5-tech. And so we've already got a couple of those guys. And with that big of a number, they would sign like Clowney,
mm-hmm.
So I just don't think that's likely. What are your thoughts on the first part of the question? Are the Seahawks going to be better this year? And the second part, do we trade for a guy? And if it's not Kerrigan, are there other guys that you might prefer?
So, okay, so tackling all of that, I think the defense is going to be better because I think the depth is better. It's better on the back end because they've just got more players and better players and a lot less Tedrick Thompson, which is going to be a good thing. they're better in the middle because you've got Brooks now there. You're not looking for Kendricks to be the guy, and Barton's got another year of experience, and they really have five guys there in the at linebacker that can step in and start and play and be great. So that's helpful. And then the defensive line is still, to me, it's the weakest part of that unit. But whereas last year it was Clowney, and then if Clowney didn't get it done, you were kind of hoping that Quentin Jefferson might, but he only had a couple of like really good games, and the rest of the time he was replaceable. I mean, they didn't really have anything in terms of a pass rush from the front four. And this year, instead of, when Clowney was hurt or when he was double or triple teamed, they couldn't do anything. This year, between Taylor and Robinson and Mayoa and Irvin, and, they've got guys. They've got a lot of guys. And so if someone has to come off the field, if someone gets hurt and misses a game, there's not going to be that huge drop off. I know that it's not as good at its best without Clowney, but it's far better at its worst this year than last year. So it's a lower ceiling, but much higher floor as far as the front end. But I think the improvements in the middle and at the back more than make up for that. So I would think that they're better overall.
So you think Quentin Dunbar kind of raises the bar overall, helps them raise the bar?
It helps. I would say it's getting Diggs for an entire season, getting Dunbar, and then adding Brooks. Basically, or the Brooks, Kendrick like trade out, and then getting Irvin, which just kind of you just tack on there as an additional depth piece that wasn't even he's not even, there's not even anyone to replace from last year. Like, it's just extra. And I just think
snaps for Marquise Blair.
That would be great, especially in the big nickel. Just to get him in there as a third safety in the big nickel, get him some time.
So well in his limited time. I just think that adding him a little bit more would be a really nice addition.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see him get start and let McDougald be the big nickel and be a rotational guy that rotates in and out at different spots and does different things. He's so versatile. He can play free safety. He can play strong safety. He can line up and play a weak side linebacker if he has to. I mean, he's so versatile. I kind of like him in a rover type role where he does a little of everything. I think that they could get a lot out of his skill set that way. But you'd have to have Blair be your starter, which I would also be okay with. The second part of that question was about Kerrigan. I'm with you. Is it a possibility? Sure, but the one part of it is the compensation has to be next to nothing. Yeah, it's going to be, we're going to cut him if you want him. Trade for him because other people then you don't have to compete with other people for him. And the Seahawks go, sure, here's a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick, and they go ahead and they bring him in.
But that cap hit is still 11.5.
The cap hits. Yeah. It is. It's still brutal. And so I don't know what you do with that. Maybe you have as part of it a thing where you work out a deal where he adds an extra year. So instead of 1 year, you get 2 out of him, lowers his cap number down, but he still gets his money. You just spread it out over 2 years type of thing. I don't know. You're trading for a 32-year-old on the last year of his contract. That's not someone that you're dying to go out and get.
Yeah, he had 5.5 sacks in 2019 too. It's not like he was ultra productive. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that it's more likely the Seahawks try to get a defensive tackle in. Timmy Jerrigan played 7 games in 2019. These guys are all free agents right now. Mike Daniels out of football in 2019. Snacks Harrison, everyone's talking about this guy, but he's more of a run stuffer. Xavier Williams, run stuffer. Jonathan Hankins, run stuffer. Those guys are out on the market right now, unsigned. Seahawks could pick those guys up, and I think that's the more likely scenario, where there's not a lot of out of pocket for any one of those guys, and it's a position of need when you take a look at the roster. And I don't see him going out and spending that kind of money on a guy that's at the end of his career. Maybe if he's cut and he comes in on a vet minimum thing, maybe. But he's already playing he's playing a 5 tech spot where we've got Green and Collier, and I'm not sure if he'd be any better right now at this stage in his career.
Well, we don't know about Collier, and maybe he just develops into nothing.
Collier's going to have a great year. I'm calling it right now. If the Seahawks play at 2020 season, Collier's going to be an emerging figure in that defense. I'm calling it right there.
I hope so. I really hope so. Right now, I'm banking on Rasheem Green, who's shown flashes of greatness in his 2 seasons, but they've only been flashes, and they've been come in between long gaps of lack of production. I'm hoping that he can turn those flashes into regular production, and if he can, he's going to be a great player. And that's, to me, much more likely and much what I'm counting on as far as the development goes. If Collier develops beyond a situational or rotational backup type of thing, that's just bonus. Like, I mean, there's absolutely no downside to him developing into that. I'm just trying to keep my expectations for him a little lower, just because we didn't see anything, and I don't want to get fooled just because of his draft status.
So the next question comes from Camden McLaren, and the question is, and I'm going to just read it and then we can dissect it, because I'm not exactly sure if it is meant the way that it is stated. The question is, assuming the NFL does not play any games in 2020 and they roll all contracts back a year, and we need to figure out what is meant by that. What Seahawks players would you expect to be gone in 2021 that would have played in 2020? And I can only assume that she's referring to just 1-year contracts. So you've got guys like Greg Olsen, Bruce Irvin, Quentin Dunbar, Hollister, Mayoa, Hyde, Apati, Agbuahe, Nico Thorpe, Posick, and Dorsett. There's a couple other guys, but those are the guys in 1-year contracts. Depending on how the league, if we don't have a season, how does the league address all these type of players and the contracts they've signed, and then they don't play any games? And does it accrue? Does it not accrue? Do they default back to their 2020 contract status for 2021 and play that year then a year later? Those sorts of questions need to be thought out and answered. I don't know how to interpret that question exactly, other than to say, it's a crapshoot. If all those contracts are now voided in 2021, I would say that the likelihood of 1 or 2 of those guys coming back is probable, but most of those folks that we just talked about would probably likely be gone.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of 1-year rentals, guys that are there to bridge a gap until a young player is ready. Even if it's a young player who's not currently on the roster, but they're waiting ahead till next year's draft type of situation. Most of those players, I think, are they're here for 1 year. They're here to come in and make an impact, and then they'll go sign a contract elsewhere. And I think the
exception could be Quentin Dunbar,
obviously, and the other one
possibly Dorsett or Hyde if they work out, and they might sign a 1 or 2 year deal after, because they're younger guys and they have a little bit more in the tank.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe Bruce Irvin, because if he shows that he's productive, likes the role, likes the locker room, all of that, they know him. I could see him, signing on for an extra couple of years. He's getting a little older, but basically he would sign on for 2 more years and, be there and kind of like finish out this, his career here in Seattle where it started. And I could see that happening too. So, and anyways, that's how I read the question is that basically like you go into 2021, there's no games in 2020, but all the contracts advance. And what do teams do? And to me, I think you just go into next offseason as kind of a blank slate. You don't worry about what you wanted to do this year because you're in a different cap situation. You're in a different draft situation. And you go figure it out from there. And I think that is what you have to do rather than going at this from the individual, like, oh, well, we had this guy who we brought him in to do this role. Let's just re-sign him and, try again.
Yeah.
Because now they're a year
You could look
older
at it both
and there's different
ways.
players available.
You could look at it in a different way entirely and say that if the NFL doesn't play, it's very unlikely that college plays. And now you're going into a year with no college football, and you go into a draft with, you're depending on evaluating players from 18 months prior. And you may elect to depend more on veteran players next year than ever before, just because of the lack of evaluation of the college players coming into the NFL. So it could be a really screwy couple of years here. I mean, and it's very difficult to predict exactly how it all plays out.
Well, and the other factor here is that, so the salary cap of any one year is based on the revenue of the year before. The revenue is almost entirely set by the TV contracts, like all of the gate and concessions and all of that. Actually doesn't even factor into profit sharing. Those just stay local with the owner and that kind of stuff. So the salary cap's really based off of the revenue share, which is the TV contract. If there are no games, there's no revenue. So what does that do to the salary cap? And what does that do to current contracts? And you're going to see this be a negotiation thing. As we've seen with the NBA and Major League Baseball, it's going to be something that's going to come up. There's going to be a collectively bargained solution to this, even if it's for 1 year, just to get the, everything back so we can actually have football and get the revenue back where it used to be so that they can move forward. There's got to be something involved in that. And without knowing what that might look like, because right now there's an infinite possibility. It's really hard to predict anything that anyone's going to do, because if they're like, oh, we're just going to prorate everyone's contract to, a certain number, let's say 50% of what it is. So instead of Russell Wilson making 35, he makes 17 and a half. And the cap's cut in half that way. Well, I could see teams, definitely going young, because anyone that is a free agent isn't going to want to take a half a deal. They're going to be like, wait, just because everyone else's contracts got cut in half, if you want to sign me, I'm still worth this much. And I think that you're going to basically, there are teams that will pay it, but I don't think you want to do that in a situation like, where the salary cap is much lower. Why would you pay normal price? And so in that case, you'd go young, and you go looking into the draft, and you go looking for people who aren't going to cost much on a tiny salary cap.
Very interesting. Do you have any questions written down?
I've got two. Although I just clicked off the screen that had them, so let me grab them again. So this question comes from @wordsreadnever, or wordsreadnever. And it said that we did ask for left field questions. So it said, should the UK be worried about chlorinated chicken imports?
That's funny.
And then he also adds, I bet you don't tackle that one. But I specifically, since he said he bets we don't tackle that one, I wanted to make sure to bring it up. And I actually researched this a little bit.
Nice. I'm glad that you did, Keith.
And the answer is kind of. Because the truth is that they have been noticing this. Currently, if you think about concentration, like the parts per million, parts per billion is low enough that it's not in any way, shape, or form a toxic dose. It's just there. And it's troublesome that it exists, but it's low enough that I think you can get away with it. What I would be concerned about is what we don't know about in this situation is there's not good science to show if it's cumulative. So if you have that really low dose over a long period of time, if that is a problem, the current science suggests no, but there's not a lot of stuff there. And so that would be that would be one of those things that you kind of need to watch for. And then the other thing is, okay, if it might be okay now, but does that level get stronger, get higher over the next few months? Because if it does, then absolutely, then you're talking about getting up to where you could have a low level toxic dose, and that would be catastrophic.
Here's my thing, and this is kind of a Donald Trump answer. Don't kids swim in chlorinated swimming pools all the time and swallow water? Okay, that's the end of that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, anytime you put chemicals in your body that normally aren't naturally ingested or created, it's problematic and can be. What if you get a chicken that is hanging around the chlorine just way too long, and it collects a lot more particles per billion, as you describe it, than the chicken next door. And then, does that come out in the cooking process? Does it stay in your system for a long time? Like you said, does it accumulate over time? Who knows?
Strangely, there's not a lot of science about people ingesting chlorine simply because, you drink bleach, it'll kill you.
Yes.
So,
right.
People,
maybe this
for
is
some reason,
thing.
people have not wanted to participate in this study.
Maybe this is the COVID-19 answer we've all been waiting for. Just chlorinate our chickens, and it helps us. It preserves us, not in more ways than one.
Slowly disinfect the body.
Wow. Okay. That was a great question. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that was, like I said, I had to research it. I didn't, obviously, if you are really familiar with the issue, you're probably shaking your head at me because I didn't answer it well, but I did research it for about 15 or 20 minutes, and that's about it. I read like three news articles about it, and I was like, okay, that's good. But okay, so then there's another question here, and it says, interested to know if you have a favorite Scottish brew. And it says not whiskey, which is too bad because Scotch whiskey is,
nice.
It's, a good single malt Scotch is special, especially one that's been aged for like 18 years. And I mean, I don't tend to do that very often, maybe once a year, but it's a treat.
Yeah, I have a bottle of 12-year aged Scotch that is now 18-year aged Scotch because I've had it sitting in my in my collection for at least 6 years. I'm not a Scotch drinker, so I keep it for somebody that comes over and requests it, and I haven't had any requests, so it's been sitting there for a while. Hopefully, it still stays good. I would assume it does over time.
Okay, so I do have a couple of brews from Scotland that I've tried and have enjoyed. One is called Wolf from Windswept Brewing, and it's a strong dark ale. It's in America, I think I would call it it's very much closer to a porter than it is an ale, even though porters or ales, that's a brewing temperature thing, but whatever. But it has kind of that flavor, and then it's got jalapeno, or not jalapeno, habanero, I think.
Oh wow!
Nice. Just a little bit of that in the background, and there's something about chili beers. You get a dark, like a stout or a porter, and you add just a little bit of that habanero heat. It fits really well together. It's like chocolate and spicy, which is a great combination. A dark beer and spicy combines well. So I've had that one once. That one was really good. And then the other one, trying to look. Oh yeah, there it is. It was from Tempest Brewing Company, and it was called Elemental. It's a dark ale. And I'm trying to think of it. This is a true porter. This isn't an American porter. This is a UK porter in that it's just different. It's a little less carbonated, made to serve a little warmer. It's not quite not quite an English brown. It's a little darker and thicker and maltier than that, but it's tasty. Just absolutely tasty. It's a robust porter too, which means it's got a higher alcohol. That always helps. But yeah, it's if you end up in one of those places where you can get import beers from, craft breweries outside the country, look for those because those were tasty. And I honestly don't know if I've had another beer from Scotland besides those two. It's
Yeah,
just
that's
not
interesting. I mean, I've got 3 Scottish style ales right now in my possession. I'm going to drink one here in a minute from Barrio. But I've also got a Founders Brewery Dirty Bastard Scotch style ale, which I'm looking forward to tasting. And then I've also got what is it? Yeah, that one, the Founders Dirty Bastard Scotch Ale, and then the Barrio Rojo Scottish Ale, Amber Ale that I'm going to try here in a minute. And then I've also got some Irish style red ales too. So that's kind of my favorites. And one of the local favorites here that everyone seems to be drinking in Phoenix is the Kilt Lifter. It's a Scottish,
which is funny because
ale.
that's from up here.
Yeah,
in the Pacific Northwest. That's Pike Brewing on Pike Street, like literally just at the end of the market, the Pike Street Market. Great, awesome, completely gravity fed brewing system there, and they make Kilt Lifter. That is one of my favorite beers of all time. Just absolutely outstanding.
They made a 100-calorie version of that beer called Guilt Lifter. And
nice.
It's my go-to favorite beer now that I have in my refrigerator. So I'm not a huge beer drinker. Like, I will have a 12-pack and it will stay in my refrigerator for like 2.5, 3 months. I'm drinking, a little bit of red wine now and again. I'll have a beer. I'll have a margarita. But usually, 3 or 4 times a week, I'll have one of those. And that'll be kind of the limit of my drinking. And it's funny. I probably drink a little bit more here in Arizona than I did in the Northwest, only because it's just warmer here, and it's kind of nice to have a refreshing beverage at the end of the day. It just is. So,
they have another version of Kilt Lifter that is been aged in bourbon barrels, and it's just a bourbon barrel aged Kilt Lifter. That
wow, my daughter
honestly,
would love that.
If you can find it, buy it. Like, just straight up. It'll be one of the better beers you've ever had.
Nice.
Most beer that's from, a mid-level, like a Vienna, Marzen Scotch ale, that from that level and darker, age it in some bourbon barrels, and man, it just gets better. It just gets better. And when I've had it once. Found a Kilt Lifter that had been bourbon barrel aged, and it was fantastic.
So I have one more question from a listener, K Nuri, at K Nuri on Twitter, asks Antonio Brown, yes or no?
No.
So for me, and I agree, you have to look at it in a cost benefit analysis as a team. If you're John Snyder, you're not just going to say outright no. You're not going to say yes. You're going to really look at it. That's because you look at every deal. But this deal, you look at it, it's like, no, thank you. Sure, he's got 4 All-Pro seasons, but he only's caught 4 passes in the last 18 months. He's 32 years old this year. He's burned 2 franchises in the last 18 months. 3 Raiders, Patriots, and
Steelers.
Pittsburgh. And then he's under police investigation, league investigation for assault and rape and other things. Faces a minimum of 8-game suspension if he is reinstated. And he's just a toxic cancer. And I wouldn't want him around the team. Like, end of story. Like, it doesn't seem to be that complicated.
On top of the the toxic cancer part. There's the rape allegations and the
right,
child
exactly.
abuse allegations and these things that have nothing to do with football. And you're like, do you really want that around your team? Do you really want to invite that into your city? And on a team that's got Lockett and Metcalf already, and where Josh Gordon is now an option. I don't see the need to take the risk to bring in a guy that, yeah, if everything works out great, you've got one of the best players in the NFL, but what's the probability of hitting, that particular jackpot? I think it's pretty low. And therefore, I'm not going to take that risk. It's just not worth it to me.
So, speaking of Josh Gordon, I've got a few questions for you. And I'm going to have a Josh Gordon question right up front. So Josh Gordon asked for reinstatement. If you really take a look at our roster and take a look at the position group, behind Lockett and Metcalf, you've got Dorsett that looks as to be the likely third receiver. And then you've got just a whole bunch of stuff. It looks like we could use a guy like Josh Gordon to kind of solidify that spot. Okay, if we bring him in, what are the roster ramifications of that move? And does his reinstatement come with a suspension for any games?
It shouldn't, because what he was suspended for is no longer against the rules. That's why his reinstatement should be a given, and it shouldn't come with any.
So should his reinstatement just be like an expungement? Like all marijuana arrests over the last however many years for a city they're just automatically expunged, no longer count against you. So when you apply for a job, it's no longer on your record, etc.
As in the states that have legalized things, or in the towns or whatever, and you look at Kansas City and other places that are doing it, even in the states that don't. If you're going to basically legalize it and be like, it's no longer a crime, we're just ending this policy, then the people who violated that are currently in jail or suspended from their job need to get reinstated. They need to get let out. It needs to just go away. And I'm okay with that. I think that's the right thing to do overall. And I think it's especially the right thing to do in Josh Gordon's case. He needs to be around a team. He needs to be around the structure and the organization and those kind of things, because those are the things that are going to help him in his life. And as far as like getting past his dependency on these kind of things, it's not going to be a suspension and pushing him out away from all of his support network and into the presence of the people who got him in trouble to begin with. That's not going to help him. Helping him is going to be bringing him in to an environment that's going to be there for him, to be a support network. And if suspending him and all of these kind of things were going to work for him, they would have worked a long time ago, and they haven't. So I think that the best thing for him is to get him on a team, on a roster, and let him just be a part of that organization. And that's what I would love to see the NFL do. And because of their new policy and the current CBA agreement that says that they're no longer testing for any of this, then I would say, he needs to be given that opportunity.
Sweet. Next question. With COVID-19 raging and setting record illness metrics in a number of states, and with no let up and no real mitigation efforts to curb that, how confident are you that there will be any kind of football played in 2020?
I read a thing that said that scientists in other countries, Europe, Asia, have basically looked at what's going on and said that the U.S. has given up. We're not even going to try anymore.
That sure looks that way.
And that's it in a lot of places, like where you are in Florida. Yeah, that's what's happening. And other places, Washington up here just issued you must wear a mask if you're anywhere in a public place, indoors or outdoors. um, you know, we're going to continue to try. But for most of the country, it's like they've given up.
So in the governor, Ducey, came out and said, I'm not going to issue a statewide mandate on masks, but I'm going to allow cities to be able to do it. Earlier, he blocked cities from doing it. So this is just the development in the last 5 days or so. So the city councils, local city councils, quite a bit, the majority have come out and made their own statements requiring masks. Others have not. But Maricopa County, the largest county, the county with like 4.5 million people that live in it, just came out this morning with a mask requirement. So
good.
Hopefully, that'll help. That'll help turn it around a little bit. But it's a tough. This state in particular is interesting to me because it's definitely on the libertarian side of things. Based on where I've come from in the Northwest, it's a little bit more, stay out of my business type of a state. And so we'll see how that goes. But I think that will help. That'll help drive those numbers down a little bit. And, I don't see it closing up like it was before, where businesses are closed and there's a stay-at-home order and all that stuff. I think that's probably past. I think now you're going to see, though, hopefully more, common sense solutions, washing your hands, wearing masks, social distancing. Hopefully those things kind of come back into not being a political statement, but more just common sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. That's a completely different issue we can get into. Like, the whole like wearing a mask is a political thing. I don't get.
I don't either. It's weird.
It's do you want to be safe? Then wear one
and keep other people that you love safe.
And do you actually care about anyone else other than yourself?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Well, then you should wear one. And that's the end of it. And there is literally no counter side to that. There's no
that's
counter
the
argument.
issue.
There's
Keith.
nothing else.
Some people are just, it's beyond reason with certain things and certain people and certain outlooks. And, at that point, you can't argue anymore. You just have to move on. Okay.
Okay, I got a couple random questions for you.
Wait.
Nothing to do with football.
Okay, let's get to it in half a second.
Okay.
I'm going to open up my second beer.
Uh-oh.
Because we're 45 minutes into the show, and I got to make sure I open this before the show ends. So this is my Barrio Rojo Scottish Style Amber Ale. Nice.
That's a nice sound.
So I'm pouring it, and it's got a real nice, deep, chocolatey amber look to it, and it's developing a real nice tan head to it. That looks really nice. Yes? Yes.
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 Except for that no one that's listening to this can see.
No one can see,
but
and I'm just not a very good beer person. Like, you gave this incredibly eloquent, 5-minute speech on your first beer. And for me, it's like, yeah, it's kind of ambery looking and it's got a head on it. And when I took the first taste, it tasted good. That's my analysis. So let me take a sip of this. Ooh, that's got so much more depth and texture than the first one. There's nothing against the Oak Creek Brewing Amber Ale, because it would be like an everyday beer that sits in your fridge and you give it to friends when they come over and you can keep it around a while. This other one is way more, has way more texture and depth, and I don't know the proper words to use to describe what I'm tasting, like beer language. But it's really malty. There's not a lot of hopish to it. There's not a lot of bitterness at the end. It's a little teeny bitter, but more sweet. But yeah, that's good. I enjoy that.
Awesome.
All right. So, question: you had a couple of non-football related questions.
Oh, these are just downright silly.
These are frightening to me. Okay, go ahead.
So, what's the most memorable book you've ever read?
Wow. Interesting. Probably The Cosmos by Carl Sagan. That was the most impactful book, and I received it as a gift. I think I was 20, 21, 22, fresh out of college. I had taken astronomy in school and really enjoyed it, and showed a lot of curiosity in it. And my aunt gave me the fully illustrated version of The Cosmos by Carl Sagan. So it had all sorts of colored pictures in it, and diagrams and drawings, and actual pictures of the universe and the cosmos. And I read it cover to cover, and it was just one of those books that kind of changed your life. And I remember that the most.
See, I'm going to go in exactly the same direction. A different author, a little bit later, but not much. It would be A Brief History of Time by.
Yeah.
Let me look for it because the name just skipped my brain, but it's right there.
The guy in the wheelchair.
Yes, it's him. Hold on, I'm gonna grab it because it's literally on my shelf. Hawking, that's who it is.
Yeah,
God,
Stephen
my
Hawking.
brain. Yeah,
I know, I lost it too. Stephen Hawking. Yeah, no, I have that. I have the follow up to that, and I've read that, and I think I gave that to my 13-year-old son last year to read.
Oh, he does such a great job of taking the most complex, crazy mathematical things that we've ever come up with, and boiling them down into something that anybody can read and get some understanding out of. He's so good at that. And it was just one of those books that was like super inspiring. And I'd already, I was in school as a physics major, so I was already kind of into that stuff, whatever. And then I read that book because somebody gave it to me. My dad actually gave it to me, and I was just remember thinking, I'm like, right, this is one of those like reaffirm. This is definitely what I want to continue studying. This is where I want to be because it just spoke to me as like being, this is what I want to study, and it was great. And then I ended up not doing it anyway because I didn't want to spend my time in a lab.
That's funny. I know. I've read that book and then I read it again. Like I finished it and then I read it again because you only pick up like 25% of it when you first read it through. You're like, this is just some big stuff. I need to read it again. And yeah, fun, fascinating. Like I've always been interested in that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of other stuff out there. Paul Green, and there's just all that physics stuff. Just is very intriguing. I'm currently reading The Enigma Cube by Douglas Richards. It's kind of an alien found artifact type book. It's a thriller. It's not a spy novel, but it's got kind of that intrigue and chasing, around the world to try to figure this thing out and solve it and protect it and all that kind of intrigue type stuff. So I've always been interested in, I don't know, sci-fi thriller type books, but the Sagan thing, geez, I mean, that just kind of changed everything. I mean, because if you really think about it, when you grew up, at least in my time frame, in school, you just really didn't learn a lot about physics and astronomy and those sorts of things until you went to college and you took those specific courses. They just weren't available to you as a young person, and if your parent wasn't really educated in that, you just had no way of learning it. And so that was really awesome.
Yeah, that was a nice answer to a question that I did not think would end up being that deep. So awesome. You got one for me? Or
I have.
Lead you with another one.
No, I have I'll give you one. So now that you and your lovely wife Liz have opened up a business, a small business, now you're officially a small business owner. Congratulations. Do you have any advice for those listeners out there that are thinking about starting their own business?
Don't do it in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, touche.
Now, granted, that was never the intention because we started this, like 18 months earlier, maybe even a little more. It's a very long process to open a vet hospital because of all the capital that's required, all the stuff. It's not
It's a brick and mortar
easy
store, so it's a lot more involved than just home operated business.
Yeah, and so it's there. I would say what I don't skimp on the business plan, especially your financial projections. Talk to good people who've done similar things to make sure that your financial projections are conservative as you think they should be, and then go more conservative because the first chunk of time is expensive. And your clientele, your sales, whatever it's going to be, is going to be slow. It takes time to build a business, and the only way to survive that time is if you went into it with projections and backup cash and that kind of stuff that would allow you to get through that time before you hit your break-even period. So go through the process of writing and developing a business plan, especially a marketing plan. Get some expert help. That's the second thing would be to hire great people and let them do their job. Get a good attorney, get a good accountant, if you need a contractor, go get a good contractor. Don't go discount on these things. And then listen to them. Let them do what they do best because they know way more about that stuff than you do. Listen to them, take their advice. They're only there to set you up to do good things. So those would be my two big pieces of advice for people who want to start a business.
Okay, your turn.
Okay, so this one, I have to figure out how I'm going to ask it because you have no idea what I would mean if I ask it the way that I wrote it. Do you believe in ghosts and other paranormal phenomenon?
Interesting. I've not had any personal experience with a ghost or things moving, out of the corner of my eye that I couldn't explain or anything like that at all that have impacted me personally. So, but I'm not arrogant enough as a human being to say that they don't exist and that it couldn't be possible for other people or all that kind of stuff. The same thing with like aliens and extraterrestrial life. I think anybody that studies physics and astronomy and the cosmos as much as you, or even as much as I have, just as a hobby, would be foolish if we said that no other life existed out in the universe. Statistically, it is probable that there are many Earth-like planets in our own galaxy. It's estimated there could be as many as 100,000 Earth-like planets in our own galaxy that could support life. And of those, dozens and dozens and maybe thousands would have advanced life. And so I think that is likely. Have we had alien encounters and spaceships and all that kind of stuff here? I don't know. I've never personally experienced it. I think there's mounting evidence that something has shown itself. There's videos and other unexplained phenomenon, what you would call unidentified flying objects. But they don't. There's no physical evidence. There's no feature film that shows like a real alien creature giving an interview. It's just not that simple. And so even that, I don't know. But again, I'm not arrogant to presume that it doesn't exist. I think that you need to keep searching, keep collecting, keep the stories coming. And I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in allowing all of the evidence to to present itself and to not hide the evidence and to just allow the public to make their own decisions about things. But yeah, as far as the ghost things, I don't have any personal, I wish I did, because I think it would be extremely interesting and fascinating, and I would be blown away. But I personally haven't had any experience. How about you? Have you had any experience at all?
None, none whatsoever.
What do you think?
So I bring this up because I say that when I said that I didn't think you'd understand how I wrote out the question, because the question I was going to ask is, are you a Bugar or a Shaniac? Which won't mean anything to you, but it has to do with the show BuzzFeed Unsolved, where they look at these famous cases of things and go and do investigations of famously haunted places and that kind of stuff. And one of the people absolutely believes that everything is evidence of a ghost, and the other guy is the complete skeptic. So they're just like on opposite ends. And I think that I am more on the complete skeptic side, and my wife is more on the other end of the spectrum. So we're kind of like there, and so it's which is part of the reason why it's fun to watch that show with her, because we have like we look at stuff and she'll be like, that's compelling, and I'll be like, no, it's not. And other things, like I'll be like, okay, I can't explain that in any way at all. And she's like, see, of course. And I'm like, whatever.
Right, exactly.
But it's fun. So but yeah, so for me personally, I'm.
How about UFOs or life outside of our own planet?
Life outside of our own planet is a guarantee, in that we found evidence of organic molecules on comets and things like that. So I think it's pretty safe to say, yes, absolutely. There's life out there. Have they visited here? That's really hard to say yes to, simply because of the physics involved and the difficulty of traveling, multi-light year distances, and just accelerating up to a speed where you could do it in a few years worth of time to get from one to another, and then decelerating back down, slowing down so you can zoom on by. Just the energy involved in those two things, it's mind-boggling. And maybe it's because I'm used to the constraints of Earth and our civilization and where we are technologically, but the idea of getting to someplace in a semi-timely manner to go be an explorer and then go bring that information back home, it just feels impossible at this point. And so I have a hard time believing that anything's come to visit us and observe us or anything like that. But the idea that there's nothing else out there is crazy to me. There's absolutely stuff out there. There has to be. If you just look at the probability of the number of Earth-like planets that are in the green zone from a sun, just from the exoplanets that we've found using the Kepler telescope, there's been a ton of them, and then we've searched such a small, tiny fraction of our own galaxy, and then to think that there are billions of other galaxies out there. Like, yes, there's definitely other life in the universe besides on this little planet.
Okay, back to football. It was recently announced that 4th-round draft pick Colby Parkinson had a Jones fracture in his 5th metatarsal pinky toe. Had surgery back on June 2nd. Recovery can be 10 to 12 weeks, which would get him back by opening game, but would likely have him miss the majority or all of training camp. How will this impact Parkinson's learning on the offense and hinder his development? And how would this impact the position group overall?
It's going to hurt his ability to make an impact in year one, because he's not going to get all those reps. He's not. One of the things with him was he needed to learn how to block. He needed to learn how to create proper leverage and use his hands. And you're not going to do that studying film. You've got to get out there and get through it. You've got to go through the drills, and you've got to do it so that way it becomes intuitive and just natural. And he's going to miss all of that, which means that all of that growth has to wait a year. And so now it comes down to just his ability as a pass catcher. And then he has a lot of talent there, but it limits his role significantly. And that's bad for him. On the other hand, you're in a position group with Disley and Olsen and Wilson and the other tight end, the one that caught all the passes last year. Why is my brain so bad with names today? Holy cow! Hollister. There we go. Wow, I'm just having a day. So, yeah, I mean, he's in a room with that. I don't think it affects the position group because it's such a deep group already. But it hurts him individually because it makes it harder for him to learn enough to expand his role enough that he can get on the field.
Yeah, I think it even creates a situation where he starts the year on the PUP list in order to just keep a guy like Wilson on the roster for another 6 weeks or whatever.
I could see that because if he's not going to be ready, that means he hasn't practiced, and if he hasn't practiced, then he can be placed on the PUP, get pushed out 6 weeks, and be given a chance to work one-on-one with coaches and that kind of stuff. He can't participate in team drills, but he can do a lot of one-on-one work and learn some of that stuff that we were talking about. And it lets them keep Wilson, who would otherwise have been cut. And then you've got a situation where keeping Wilson can block on the move. He can be a fullback.
You know who else it helps?
Now you don't have to keep Nick Bloor.
It helps Stephon Sullivan, possibly because there's another big, huge red zone target guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, interesting. In fact, Pete Carroll's come out and said, Sullivan's going to be a wide receiver. We're going to ask him to lose a little bit of weight. Could he go back to Sullivan now and say, sorry, you're a tight end now. Can you put on a little bit of extra weight and see if you can become that red zone target for us, now? Maybe that's the best option for him to make the team. I don't know. Okay. So another question. Okay, I'm gonna do a series of questions.
Wait, before you do your series of questions, I want to rate my second beer.
All right.
So this is the other one from Pelican, the one that you told me to have second. It is their export stout. It's called Tsunami, 7%, 45 IBU. So it's still pretty low on the IBU scale. This isn't a hoppy beer at all. First thing is that is really rich, and the depth of the malt just jumps off out of the bottle onto your tongue. You feel it all the way across the tongue. It's got a real thick, deep, malty flavor. The hops there it's really mild, and it doesn't show up until the very end, and you kind of feel it a little bit at the end. Otherwise, it's almost sweet because it's got so much malt in there. It's not sweet, but that's why it's bitter units. But it's almost sweet because of the amount of the malt to hop ratio is really high. So you get all that malty flavor and everything, and you just a little bit of hops at the end. And they're very mild hops, even at that, and that they don't overpower anything. This isn't a cascade hops where you're gonna pick up those citrus notes pretty strong or anything like that. It's more like a Tettinger or a Czech Saaz, which is they're noble hops, but they're milder in flavor and they don't have those fruity undertones to them. And it matches really well with the dark stout. And so you have these like notes of chocolate and oak and coffee, which none of those things are actually in there, but you kind of pick up those deep, darker flavors through the darker malts that are included in this. And overall, I mean, this is a go-to. This is an
Nice.
absolute go-to for me. This is one of my favorites. This is just a really good beer.
Sweet. I'm glad I chose that for you. Otherwise, I was going to choose the Deschutes Stout, and I'm curious now as to the difference in the flavor profile of those. But I won't ask you to drink it on this show, because that would be, after that, it would be difficult for you.
After that, you'd be finishing the show on your own. So.
All right, I'm going to give you a series of questions, and you just give me, short answers.
Okay.
What is your go-to music streaming service of choice?
Pandora.
Why?
Because it introduces me to stuff I've never heard before. And that was kind of the thing about Pandora when it first came out, was that, you say, okay, I want to listen to music that's like, pick a band, and they'll give you songs by that band, but also songs that have a lot of the same musical characteristics, whether it's certain chord progressions or themes in the lyrics and that kind of
stuff. So
it
goes beyond like a radio, like Tom Petty radio will have Tom Petty, but it'll also have a whole bunch of other stuff that's like Tom Petty.
Yeah, and so it does that, but it gives you some more deep cuts in there, things that people you've never heard of, small little indie band type of stuff, stuff that you'd never hear on the radio. And I like being introduced to new things. And sometimes the things that are new to me aren't new to anybody else. I don't know where I've been, but it's given me.
It expands your listening pleasure.
Yeah,
awesome.
if it wasn't for Pandora, I wouldn't know who Panic at the Disco is, and I love their music. I wouldn't know who Flyleaf is, and I love their music. And so that's my go-to streaming service, because I like learning about new music and new bands, and I just love that aspect of it, and being able to hear stuff that I've never heard before, even if it's been around forever, and being able to really enjoy it, because if it's good, I don't care what's popular. I just want to know if it's good, and if it's good, then I'm game. So that's why I go through Pandora.
With that said, what's your favorite music genre right now that you're listening to the most?
My favorite, I don't even know I could call it if there's a genre involved, but it's basically it's like modern alternative rock kind of stuff. So it's stuff like I said, Panic at the Disco's there, Fall Out Boy, just a lot, Evanescence, a lot of those modern rock alternative bands. I don't know. That's just kind of been my thing forever, and so therefore, like when I was in high school, it was Nirvana and all of the '90s Seattle music scene, and then I've just aged with that particular style of music, and I've kind of moved with it as it's changed, and picked up Evanescence in the early 2000s, and then just other bands along the way, and then most recently it's been those ones that I just mentioned, but it's that same kind of style, that alternative rock style.
Nice. How about movies and TVs? What's your favorite go-to service for that?
You might not believe this, but I don't really watch a lot of TV.
Oh, I believe it.
Ever.
Yeah. I believe it.
I find watching TV to be too passive, and so because I'm sitting and I'm watching and I'm just sitting.
The TV normally doesn't come on in our house until after like 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, and then it's like for an hour, and we'll watch like a Netflix show or a Amazon Prime or whatever, like Homeland or whatever. We'll watch an episode of Homeland, or we'll watch whatever it is the family all agrees to, sit down together and watch something. We'll usually kind of start a series and watch it. But you're right. We're not sitting in front of the TV for hours on hours. It just, like, the most the TV's on at any one time, it would be like 2 hours, and we're watching a back-to-back thing or whatever. But
or watching a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, or watch a movie or watch a sports. The longest the TV is ever on is when there's like football on Sunday. We'll watch a game or a game and a half or whatever. If I can get away with it, I'll watch a college game on Saturday.
My TV will be on weekends with football. All day. And you're right. So I shouldn't say that I don't want, because there is that. I will put games on. I will watch games, even if they're on and I'm not actively watching. I'm doing something else, but they're just on. It'll be on. But as far as like scripted shows or especially like reality TV kind of stuff, I don't tend to watch any of that kind of stuff. Like at all. I mean, we do have Amazon Prime here, and so that I could say that's my go-to. More recently, it's been Disney Plus. I do have kids, and what I found is when we do watch TV, I like to find shows that excite my kids, and I don't mean like SpongeBob or anything like that. I mean, Disney Plus has a show on there called Shop Class, where you have these kids that are 11 to 13 range, two of them and one high school shop teacher, and their goal is to build something, and they find out what it is at the start of the show, and they build like a bridge, like to span a certain gap and whatever, and then they put weights on it until it breaks, and then it's kind of a competition as that kind of stuff. And my kids loved it. They loved it. My 9-year-old got so excited that at the end of watching the first few episodes, he wanted to go build something. So he designed this game board with the things that hold like cards for this trading card game, that he had to come up with a game to match the board, and then got me involved. And so I showed him how to get a straight edge and how to make cuts with power tools and how to be safe and all of those things, and did a bunch of things, and he built it and painted it, and it excited him to learn something, to learn these skills and whatnot. And I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then we actually went through that because there was only one season of that. So we watched that. Now we're watching one where families, like, it's a cooking competition where these families get together and cook. And same kid, 9-year-old, has started wanting to learn how to cook. And so he's spending a lot more time in the kitchen when I'm cooking or when Liz is cooking, and learning how to do stuff and learning some techniques and some of that. And awesome. It's just, these are great. And
I wish it
the
worked.
shows are fun too.
I wish it worked for me in the same way that when like packages show up on the door and they're opened and they're pairs of shoes. And then over time, like multiple dozens of pairs of shoes show up like in a calendar year for my wife, it would motivate me to make a shoe rack that would, kind of a revolving shoe rack where it would hold like dozens and dozens of shoes would disappear, like everything except for the front. That would be, but I just can't seem to get there. I don't know why. All right. So next, if you purchase a new car today, what would it be?
Ooh. If I purchased a new car today, based on today's finances, having just started a business,
No, just no finances. Just like, what would it be? What looks fun? What looks interesting? Why would you do it? That sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So if I could just go by,
would it be utilitarian? Would it be fun? Would it be based on engine size? Like,
it would be a Tesla Model S.
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote down Tesla in my notes. I was like, I bet you choose a Tesla.
Yeah, because they are fun. They've got tremendous power. You get all the torque the moment you put your foot on the pedal, rather than
true.
like with another engine where you have to spin it up to speed and you have to shift through all the gears before you get to your maximum torque. But with an electric motor, you just, as soon as you touch the pedal, you have full torque. So their acceleration is crazy. Their top speed's crazy. They handle really well because they're light, and all the batteries, the way they put them in there, it keeps the weight super low to the ground. And on top of that, they're an electric car, so you can get like 350 miles of range, and then you bring it home and plug it in for 45 minutes, and it's full and you're ready to go again. And so it's got I don't know. It's just that to me, it's just fun, and then at the same time, it's a 4-seat, 4-door car, can seat 5, I guess. It's like a little
nice,
family car
nice
with all of the sport car qualities.
Yeah,
So
I get it.
Notice I didn't like even have to hesitate. I already knew an answer to that.
So we just last week we went off the grid. So like I now get 100% of all of our power from our solar panels on our house. So we got enough panels to installed to generate over 100% of our energy. So anything extra, we get money back from the power company. And if you know anything about Arizona Power, you know that it's outrageously expensive here, and they raise the prices like 6 to 8% every year. So I've kind of hedged against that and bought our own solar system so that we could be self-sufficient and eventually have free power, because I got to pay off the system. But other than that, it's good.
Yeah. So with that, like Arizona, like people don't realize that they don't have there's not a great way to produce electricity there. There aren't the rivers that you can set up dams like we have up here.
There's a nuclear power plant west of town about 25 miles out.
There is, and that's where they get most of their power. There are some solar farms that are out there. Mm-hmm. There's some wind farms up north between where you're at and Flagstaff. But for the most part, it's an area that buys power from other states. And that's why it's expensive. And it's also one of the fastest growing areas in the country. And so their power production is going up by a much slower rate than the power usage. And that's why the prices keep jumping up. So going solar it's a fantastic idea if you can get the stuff, and the technology today has come a long way, and it's actually pretty solid. I wonder how big the batteries are that you have storing.
It's interesting. So there is no storage. It goes directly into the grid. So it comes off the house, goes through a couple of different power regulating boxes, and then it comes back into we use it directly, and whatever we don't use then goes out. So battery it's on demand. So battery wise, to answer your question, I don't know for sure how the technology works, because obviously you need to draw power at night, and you're not generating power at night. So, but we don't have a battery. So I think what it does is it just generates the power, puts it back into the system. Because I know that there's APS put their own box out there to monitor power back that I'm putting back into the grid. So I think that's how they do it. Yeah, it is interesting. It's really interesting. The thing that fascinated me the most is there's a few different power companies out here, a few different solar companies, but they make it so difficult. Like APS makes it really difficult to use solar. So they don't want to lose customers, and so they make it very difficult. And so you kind of have to go outside of the power company here to do a solar system that makes sense financially. And so we purchased ours. We're not leasing it. So you take a loan out, or you pay cash for it, or whatever. And there's a few different ones out here, including Tesla. Tesla has its own solar batteries and solar panels and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. But it was, it's competitive in that the price that we're paying for the system is the same, or roughly the same, as the monthly outlay for power to APS. So instead of paying to Arizona Power, we're now paying the solar company for the solar panels, and then the energy itself is free. And I'd rather be doing that.
Yeah.
And then after 12 years, the system is paid off, and it's just free power. And the system itself is supposed to last 25 to 30 years. So hopefully, I'll have years, a couple $100,000 worth of power usage over time, free of charge, which would be good. Okay, question for you, and we should probably wrap this up too. Cool. You're currently a high school science teacher.
I am.
If you could choose another subject to teach or another grade level, what would those choices be, and why?
It wouldn't be another grade level. I've taught middle school. It's never going to happen. I have elementary school kids. They are scary. So it would definitely be high school. So if I had to pick another subject, I also teach math. But it would, giving a choice, it would be like calculus or statistics or even geometry, which is one of the classes I'm going to be teaching next year. Like that would be the thing, but I think that's kind of a cop-out answer since I do teach that.
It was interesting. I was not expecting you to say math. I was expecting you to say history.
Which actually was what I was going to say. Is my next thing would be history. Would I be good at it? I don't know.
I think you would be.
I don't know it that well. I would have to. I would have to study a lot as we went into different units and different whatever. But the way that I would teach history would not be memorizing dates and names and battles and whatever. I would tell a lot of I would tell a lot of stories. And do it as like.
You would try to relate to your students.
Well, yeah, and it would just be like, we're going to tell a story of trying to pick ones that I know of, and I can't think of enough details that it would make for a good podcast content. But the like in the Civil War, there was a black spy for the Union that was actually that became like a servant or a slave inside the like Robert E. Lee's like camp and his house in order to feed information back to the Union, so to tell the Civil War history from that point of view, where this absolutely instrumental person in the Civil War is someone that most of us have never heard of, was an African American woman who chose to cross enemy lines and to appear to be a slave and pretend to be in that role because no one would notice that no one would notice her in that role as a servant or a slave, and then to use that against the South to feed information to the North. Like that to me, like tell those stories and to teach history as a collection of stories of people. That would be fun.
No, that would be fun.
It would be, I think it would be awesome. And I think I would really love it. But my problem is that I don't know it. I don't know enough of it. And so therefore I would have to, it would be a real struggle the first couple of years to learn enough to teach it that way.
And to be comfortable. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. I got one last question, football related.
Okay.
We'll end it on this, unless you've got something else. Should Seahawk fans be thinking Super Bowl or bust in 2020 for the Seahawks?
No.
Or are we closer to being the same team that we've been the last couple seasons, a playoff team, but a player or two away from truly competing?
I don't think Super Bowl or bust is ever a smart choice.
Well, it was in 2012 or /13 there. I mean, we woke up in the morning, the day before the season that year, and it was Super Bowl or bust. I mean, you could really sense that the team was on a mission, and it was going to be that we were a Super Bowl team. I don't. Yeah,
it was pretty easy in 13. It was pretty easy in 13 to go into the season honestly believing that you've got the best roster in the NFL, and as long as things don't just go terribly wrong, that you're going to be there. And they were there, and they won it. And the same was true in 2014.
Yes.
And they got there, and they were close. And then things started to slowly disintegrate, a little bit here, a little bit there. But I don't think they're there now.
I don't they don't
either. Have, but they're not a long way off from that. Look at what they've got on offense as far as this.
I think the offense can definitely be a Super Bowl team.
Running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end. If the offensive line is not terrible, that is a Super Bowl caliber offense.
Yes, I agree.
On defense, I like the secondary. I like the linebacker group. If the defensive line can get enough contribution from the kids, then
if you had a couple players step up and surprise, like have kind of just breakout career type years where they're just really like Darrell Taylor comes on and has 7 to 10 sacks in his first year.
Yeah.
Alton Robinson has 4 or 5, and Mayowa has 7, and Irvin has 7, and Collier is like a beast. That could be. It's not entirely improbable that could happen, but it's unlikely, but it's within the realm of possibility.
So I look at this team and I see a lot of youth that I want to give another year to. I want to be fair to DK Metcalf and not expect him to be an all-pro in year 2, and give him another year and say 2021, go be that guy. Do what you got to do this year to be that guy next year. I want to give Taylor and Rasheem Green.
Do you regret
Brooks
that the Seahawks coaching staff didn't give the young guys a little bit more playing opportunity last year?
Absolutely. And like Blair needed to play more. Amadi needed to play more. And there's literally no reason why they let Jamarl Taylor play in the slot instead of
I agree.
Amadi.
I agree. That was the worst decision of the entire coaching staff last year, I thought.
It was a terrible mistake not to get those guys more playing time. It was. You look at DK Metcalf, and he was a starter. And guess what? He developed a lot during his rookie year. I mean, he was great at the beginning, but he became a much more complete player by the end, having been given the opportunity to develop over that time. They didn't give Blair that. They didn't give Amadi that. And now they're waiting. They didn't give Barton that. And now they're waiting, hoping that happens. Those 3 guys needed to have played way more than they did.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting, too, to see if the 4th and 5th cornerback that we mentioned last week, the week before, like the Ryan Neal, the Brian Allen, those guys, if they can make the roster, if they have opportunities at all. With Quentin Dunbar there, and with Trey Flowers, and with Griffin, there might not be a lot of opportunity back there, but it'll be interesting. The most interesting part of this entire year on the defense for me is the scheme and how guys like Brooks and Cody Barton and Marquise Blair and Amadi fit in. All those guys are young guys, but they all have these really incredibly big opportunities to make a huge impact on the defense and the way that it plays third down defense this year. It's and that could be a difference between going deep into the playoffs or not. And so I'm very curious as to see how the team does that, whether it sticks with its base defense and Brooks becomes this like close to Pro Bowl type caliber player that can drop back into coverage, and he's just amazing. You can't take him off the field, so you play him in the nickel a lot. Or if Blair comes on and has this amazing year, like he has the potential to have, it comes in and be that big nickel. So I'm very curious as to see how they play their base and their nickel defense this year.
Yeah, I look back at 2013 because I think that is what everybody compares every Seahawks team to is 2013. And I know it's a really unfair comparison because that was one of the greatest rosters ever assembled during the salary cap era. But if you look at that, who were the rookies that contributed to that team? You're not going to find many. The second-year players, yeah, there were 3 really important ones in Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, and Bruce Irvin. But where were the rookies? They didn't exist.
Yeah, well, Sherman came on. Chancellor came on.
True, but those guys were drafted in 2010, and they came on in 2011.
Yes, right.
And
right.
So they had been there for a couple of years before 2013 rolled around. 2012, they gave Russell Wilson the starting job week 1. They gave Bobby Wagner the starting job week 1. They didn't ease them in. They didn't take their time. They didn't go with a veteran presence because
they took the pain. They took the growing pains in the first 6 games of the year, and after that they were gold.
Yeah. And you go back to last year, and where was Marquise Blair? Where was Ugo Amadi? Where was Cody Barton? Instead, they went with, um, Jamal Taylor and Michael Kendricks, neither of which was good. So instead of taking their lumps over the first 6 weeks with players that have great potential and just need an opportunity to develop, they went with players with no potential that were just going to be bad. And they were bad.
Well, if guys like Rashad Penny had a larger role, or guys like Will Disley in his second year, that might have made a big difference. It's tough to know. Like Phil Haynes got hurt and then never really got into it. There were opportunities, I think, for rookies to make an impact, or second year guys, and we just had some injuries that kind of got in the way of that a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see.
Some of it was injuries, but a lot of it was coaching decisions, like Blair not playing.
No, that's very true.
And when Blair was forced onto the field, and he played great, and then people started to get healthy, and what happened? He got put back on the bench. And it's like, no, you've got a rookie who you drafted high, you have high expectations for. He got a chance to play and played great. Leave him on the field. And they didn't. They didn't take the time to develop him. They didn't give him that experience. They didn't plan for this year. And I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah, well, I think they did go a little bit win now last year, and I don't think they were quite a win now team. And it proved out to be that way, but it's hard to know in the middle of the season. When you had, I think you went into that San Francisco game at 10-2, or ended up out of the San Francisco game at 10-2. I mean, at that point, Keith, I think you're thinking, okay, we've got a real shot. I'm going to play the guys that I know that are going to give us the best opportunity to win rather than develop. And I get that. I mean, it's a tough deal. After that, it kind of went downhill a little bit. But
yeah, I'm with you. You know where I'm at. I'm like, I think that you can never look at just this year. You always have to look at this year and next year. And you don't have to start and roll with Marquise Blair at strong safety every snap, but you need to rotate him in. Get him 10 or 15 snaps. Get him some tape that he can watch of himself to learn from, because that's key to the development of a young player. And I really wish they had taken the opportunity to do that. And it's unfortunate that they didn't.
So that's it. That's all. That's my list of questions. It was a good show. We drank some beer. We answered some questions. Hopefully we hung on to our listeners. And we'll be back to do it again next week. I have no idea what we're podcasting about next week. We don't have anything written down. We had the previous 5 weeks shows all written down in a nice, tidy little calendar, and we have nothing from today forward. So it'll be interesting to see what we come up with next week.
But don't think that means we won't be here next week, because we will be, and we will be prepared, and we will put on a good show, because we always do. And this is show 178. We've had 178 consecutive weeks with Seahawk football.
I think we can honestly say that we're the only Seattle Seahawks podcast that has been on for 178 consecutive weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's good. I mean, that sets us apart a little bit. So, all right. So we'll wrap this show up for today. Thanks for joining us. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. Seahawksplaybook.com has all of the podcast archived, every current show. You can also listen and subscribe on there, obviously. And we hope you do subscribe on your favorite podcast app, because that way you get us into your feed every single week without missing a show. So until next time, Keith, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. The show is at Hawks Playbook. And you can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.